And with these set of classes, we'd be dealing up with biology, which remains important in science and technology, or we'd say in general science. The major topic remains important for PT related topics or PT related aspects also, where we find much of the questions or basic biology questions, they remain over there. And to understand biotechnology, the basic understanding of biology is important. So with these classes that may be extended up to 4, 5 as with the pace we'll look up to. These classes, they will deal up with majority of the objectivity of the biology, the basic understanding of the biology. My basic target would be to explain this particular topic, that is biology, with respect to non-science background students also, and with respect to engineers also, majority of which would comprise the majority of the aspirants also, right? So basic biology classes, these may be important for PT, and of course they may be important for state services examinations also, where we'll find much of the questions which have been asked in science and technology from the essence of biology or basic biology questions, or the facts related to biology they have been asked. All of these, they would be tackled over here. When we define biology as a topic, basically we need to understand in this there are 5 or 6 things which we'll or heads that we'll look up to. The first and foremost thing that we will understand is what is origin of life, how life has originated and what factors have attributed to origin of life, and then how different trends of evolution have gone through, different species have evolved. That will also help to understand. Now this particular topic, stretch by stretch, if we understand, then this topic is important over here, origin of life. Then understanding the basic diversity or the phylogenetic diversity, we'll say, or the classification of animal or the living beings, and the basic understanding of that is important, which again links to one more important topic over there in environment, which is biodiversity, right? So this particular thing where origin of life would be one aspect of it. With origin of life, we'll try to link up with the basic structure and functional aspects of life, where we'll understand about cells and their basic functions, how they have originated, what are their functions, how they perform their works. All of this, they would be tackled over here with cells and their basic functions, right? The third aspect of it, which would be linked to origin of life only, that would be the basic classification of living beings. With respect to this, much of the importance must be or would be given with the classification. Importance would be given to the economic uses, the economic utility of the living beings would be one aspect that we will look up to also with respect to the classification of living beings, where certain factual questions, they have been asked in biodiversity earlier also, and they can be asked in upcoming years also. So the economic utility of the living beings, how, or the economic significance of the living beings, that would be taken up over here. The fifth or the fourth aspect of this would deal up with the animal system and diseases. Animal systems, different animal systems. In fact, we'd not say animal system, rather we should say human system. That would be more appropriate to say also, right? Because questions, they would, if they have came down, questions coming from blood related diseases or blood related matching, etc., or sometimes questions are being asked from digestive system, circulatory system, heart, basic role of heart. All of these, there are certain things which have been asked earlier in UPSC, and there can be certain questions which can be asked even in earlier years. In 2012, when you will find there was one question related to contraction of muscles. So these are certain basic questions which have been asked, and there is a particular chance that any year UPSC can ask such questions in PT also, right? So human systems would be one aspect of it. Then we will look up to the common diseases. variable diseases, communicable, non-communicable, genetic disorders, all of this we will look up to. And briefly we will also speak about the plant systems. So these would be the 6 major heads under which we will deal up with biology and the basic understanding of biology with the upcoming classes that we will have. Right. Now, when we look up to this aspect, or when we look up to biology, or when we try to understand something called as life science, when we say biology, and of course biology is being taken up as something which is life science. So when the term comes into over here, the first and foremost thing, or the first and foremost term that comes into our mind while we are discussing about biology is something called as life, or relative to this, something which is called as living. The first aspect to understand biology must be, or should be, we need to understand what is something called as living, right? There are multiple definitions which are being proposed, or there are multiple definitions which are quite which have been written in different types of the books also, and people do refer to these books, and precisely these definitions say that living is something which have movement, living is something which have growth, living is something which will have ingestion of the food, or they take up food, they excrete, they will reproduce, or there are certain beings which will have different sets of functions which are being exhibited, which are not practically exhibited by non-living beings, right? We do not have movement with the non-living beings, but we'll have movement with the living beings, right? But all these things that have been defined, or all these characteristics which have been spoken about living, practically does not define what is called as living, right? So the basic question mark that appears over here while we are trying to define living is that since something is living, that's why it exhibits certain types of the characteristics. What characteristics? Movement, growth, reproduction, digestion, etc., or neural control, etc., all of these, the behavioral aspect of it, or even the social aspect of it, all of these, when they appear, when we say, the question is, since it is living, since something is living, that's why it exhibits different types of the characters, or since it exhibits all these characters, so it is living. What exactly remains true is something that we have to understand, right? See, practically the basic idea with this, or when we try to understand biology in this case, living being is not something which will since it exhibits characters, it is not living, or it is living, would not be appropriate to say also, right? Basically, something is living, something exhibits a function of living. That's why it is being termed as, it will exhibit certain characteristics, or it will naturally will have certain defined characteristics which are being exhibited, right? So what exactly remains living over here then is a question mark. What you define as living and what you define as non-living is something which has to be understood while studying, or while we start studying something called as biology, right? So at this particular point, or with this perception, when we say, see, we need to understand one basic thing respect to all different things that we see around us, all different types of systems that we see all around us, or we simply say environment that we see around us, or what we call it as biosphere, Earth as a biosphere system where lithosphere, hydrosphere and atmosphere and the living beings, they constitute all the things, and that becomes biosphere. So whenever we say living beings, we have to identify living beings with respect to things that we have in the surrounding or biosphere, right? So when we try to define living beings also, we have to understand this thing with the very basic understanding with the surrounding. Now go back to surrounding, or if we go down to surrounding, or if we go down to environment, then everything can be our environment. If we look up to the perception, earth can be our environment, or a local community can be our environment, or the complete planet can be our environment, or the complete universe can also be our environment. Everything surrounding us is environment, and living beings always have, or when we try to classify living beings, they always have an interaction with the environment, or they always have an interaction with the surrounding. So what remains in the surrounding is universe. And what is universe, and how universe is made of, what exactly are the components of the universe, right? So when we try to define something called as universe, then what we define in universe, or scientifically when we try to define universe, then everything in the form of mass, something, or everything in the form of matter when we say. Now what is matter over here? What exactly remains as matter? All different types of the elements. In which form? Either they exist in solid, or they exist in liquid form, or they exist in gases. So one aspect of universe surrounding in different shapes, or existing in different shapes, be it be stars, be it be planets, be it be galaxies, be it be black hole also, be it be anything else. It is formed of, first thing is matter, first thing is element, first thing is solid, liquid, gas, right? So universe, or something that surrounds us, is fine. One thing is that we have matter, that we have solid, liquid, gas. The second component of the universe which is being exhibited, or which is being defined, is termed as energy. Energy can never be created nor be destroyed, is something which is being taken up as the universal law. And we define that universe is composed of all the matter which surrounds us, all the energy that surrounds us is called as universe. Now with respect to this, there's one more thing which has been said, and there are multiple generalizations of that, and the basic fundamental theory which has been said, or which is the derivative of the basic theory of Albert Einstein, which says that matter and energy can be interchangeable. E is equal to mc square. Various of you might have heard about this, right? Where energy can be converted to mass, or energy can be converted, or matter can be converted to energy, subjected to, if it has been accelerated, to the square of velocity of light, right? That means in the universe there is a basic function where we define that we have something called as intercycling up of matter and energy, intercycling up of the matter and energy. And now you try to identify these things, you will find that in your surrounding everything is dependent on this only, the basic intercycling up of matter and energy. Solid, liquid, gases, they get converted into energy, energy get conserved into matter. Constantly this happens. Just take up an example of petrol, right? Or fossil fuel. Fossil fuels are formed by fossilification process. When living beings are buried deep down under the earth crust, they are being compressed due to high temperature and higher pressure. They are being liquefied, then they are being extracted as oil or different types of the fossil fuels, which again is being burnt. What does it produces? It produces mechanical energy, conversion of matter into energy. Now that energy, that mechanical energy or sound energy or even heat energy may be dissipated. In some other form it would again be absorbed, utilized, and then would come down. So the basic thing that we understand over here with the universe is that, of course, this always remains true, that there is an interconversion of matter and energy. Mass or energy constantly have a cycle of interconversion. Now, if this is true, energy can never be created nor be destroyed. It is only converted from one form to another form, going across in intercycling with the matter that can be taken up. So when you say an universal law of energy, mass and energy can be interconvertible, that can be taken up. Fine. But now when we define the processes of conversion of this matter into energy, the methods of converting matter or fixing matter in the form of energy and then releasing energy out of different substrates of matter or mass is something which has to be taken up. Now this particular interconversion or intercycling can be something which we can define as external or something that can be internal. Now you understand, universe is formed of mass, energy, they are interconvertible. Now the process of interconverting these mass or energy or matter into energy or energy into matter can be an external process or can be an internal process. How external process? In simple terms, if you understand the basic conversion, if something or if we speak about a thing called as X, you just hypothetically assume something called as X, right? That X can be anything, that X can be this pen, right? We speak about this pen or we speak about this particular thing. It can have an ability to convert matter into energy. It can have, I'm converting the mechanical energy into some form of the sound energy or in some form of other energies also, right? But whether this pen can itself do the task, right, or it requires an external aid, that has to be differentiated, right? If it requires an external aid, if it requires an external help, that becomes an external process. This is an external process. There is something externally involved. Not everything would be done by this. But if a particular thing is self-sufficient in converting, or it has the integral parts, or it has certain objects or certain things which remains as its integral part and can convert matter into energy and vice versa, energy into matter, then it becomes internal. So if you try to understand if this is the pen or if it has certain things involved in this, that it can itself take up things from the universe or from the environment or from the surrounding, convert it into utilizable form, creates an reasonable output and then dissipates the energy, conserves the energy for itself, it would have been something which will have internal process. And if it is not being able to do that thing, I'm only writing it through, or there is an external aid. And what is the external aid? This mechanical work which is being performed by this hand, right? So when I say if it is external, this would be an external process. Now this clearly differentiates between what we have taken up as a question. That is, what is the difference between a living and a non-living thing is the simple thing that we have written over here. The living things will have their own integral aspects or integral parts or integral components that have an ability to capture, convert, fix, utilize, capture, interconvert or convert, fix, store, utilize this matter and energy cycle themselves. This matter and energy cycle themselves, right? So that becomes, or they have an internal process. We have an internal arrangement. We have all different types of the arrangement, be it be a human or be it be a bacteria. It will also have the similar thing, right? It will also have that arrangement. Though the scale of that arrangement can be different with respect to humans or with respect to bacteria, but they have the same thing, that they have certain integral things that can capture, convert, fix or utilize this intercycling of matter and energy, and they are basically defined as those which will have the internal process, right? And those which will have the external process, which will have an external aid involved, that would be this pen, or that would be this non-living thing. So living beings, they have their own integral aspects, so they can transform matter and energy and fix and utilize, whereas in non-living things always require an external aid, to transform this matter and energy. So quickly we can summarize what we have seen, that if there is energy transformation, if there is transformation of the energy, non-living beings, they will always require an external aid, an external agent, an external factor involved with that. You take about the bike's engine also, or the car's engine also, or you speak about petrol being burnt, and there is an external aid to transform that energy from one form to another form, or to utilize this thing, right? So simply when you say, you understand this thing, that energy and matter, which is the integral part of the universe or the surrounding that we have, right? The two basic components, they can be interchangeable or they can be transformable themselves. For all the processes involved over here, what all processes? Interconversion or intercycling of energy matter, transformation of energy from one form to another, transformation of matter from one types of the substrate to other types of the substrate. All of this is the basic process of the universe, and non-living beings, they always require an external aid to perform these tasks, whereas in the living beings, they have their own integral aspects. They will have an external process of converting this, they will have an internal process of doing this. And how do they do, or how do they perform all these tasks? Due to the very basic concept of metabolism. And what is metabolism? Metabolism is a process where the integral aspects in the living beings are able to either synthesize substrates, or they are in a particular state to break down complex substrates. Either they are in a particular state to synthesize certain complex substrates, or they are in a state to break down certain complex substrates. In any way we speak about, if a larger substrate, if a matter is, or solid, liquid, gas in any form is being either broken, there would be some amount of energy released, right? If it is being synthesized, there would be some amount of energy fixed with that substrate that may be utilized, right? Just the similar process of, you take up the basic example of petroleum or fossil fuel, if I say, then you have certain things, living beings, their dead body being fixed, liquefied, oil is being produced. So the amount of matter which was there, some form of the matter is being fixed in this. Now this has energy. If it is being utilized, it can be utilized in different forms of the energy that we have. So we convert it into different forms of the energy which was fixed with the matter. In the same way, if there is synthesis and breakdown of substances, there could be certain things where if there is a synthesis, energy may be fixed. If there is breakdown, energy may be released. Whatever may be the case, either it is fixed or released. The living beings, they are in a particular state that they can perform these tasks themselves, and the synthesis over here, the synthesis of different types of the substances, or breakdown of different types of the substances triggers, or it will in fact run up all the processes, where the breakdown of the substances is called as catabolism, whereas the synthesis of the substrates is termed as anabolism. Together they are being termed as metabolism. So owing to the basic process, owing to the basic we'd say significance of metabolism, living beings are in a particular state that they can transform, or they can utilize matter to generate energy. That is what is termed as living, right? Now if we'll say n number of the things, now if we'll define n number of these things, since it is living, now due to the virtue or the needs of metabolism, all different things would be added. All different things are being created, and that's how biology runs into. That's how the basic processes of living beings, so that's how the basic processes that we see in biology runs into. The basic idea over here with biology or with the living beings or with the study of living beings or life sciences is just this very basic concept that living beings require energy and they need to transform that energy, right? They need to transform everything themselves. So when we try to identify, or when we try to define living beings, we have to identify two things over here: the structural aspect of living beings, the basic structure, type, their body type, their basic look, or anything that we can say, right? And the another aspect of it would be the functional aspect of living beings. We have to look up to these two things separately. We have to understand these two things separately. So living beings have a defined structure, living beings have a defined function that remains as one primary characteristic of the living beings, right? And why it is being created, there must be a proper set of arrangement to let the things perform, or to let metabolism happen also, right? So there must be a defined structure, a defined shape. So living beings have their own structural components, living beings also have their own functional components, right? So when you will say biology, or when you will understand the structural component in biology, or when you understand the structural component of living beings, how do you define the structural component? The very basic unitary structure that a living being will have is termed as cell. Now variety of the cells, variety of the structures, they can be seen, right? Various cells, they are being clubbed together to form tissues, right? Which are then formed into organs, or when they start coordinating, they form the organ systems. This is structural component. Just understand the structure of it, right? You understand the structure of heart, liver, kidney, stomach, right? This is the structural component of living being. When you will say this is a human, how you will identify human? You will identify human on the basis of two things. Number one, the structure of the human, the function of the human. What is the structure of the human? It will have two eyes, one nose, two ears, then the two hands and two legs, right? Or if you go deep down into the characteristics, then it will have a brain, it will have a heart, it will have a kidney, it will have pancreas, it will have stomach, it will have intestine, it will have muscles, it will have bones, etc., etc., etc. These are all characteristics. And what is the fundamental of all these things? The basic fundamental, everything is formed of this cell, right? So cell remains as the primary structure component, or this is the structural aspect of living being. This is the structural aspect of living being, structural composition of living beings, right? The functional aspect of living being is also equally important. And what all functional aspects of living beings which are being created or which are being exhibited, right? The functional aspect of living beings can be, first and foremost aspect of living beings is movement, right? Motion. Now if I say all living beings exhibit movement, all living beings exhibit movement, and I also say all living beings exhibit motion, these are two different statements. Which of them is correct? Which of them is correct? Right? If I say, if a simple question for PT is being made, which of the following statements are correct? All living beings exhibit movement. Second statement, all living beings exhibit motion. Which of them can be correct? Only one, only two, both, none. So for this, all living beings exhibit movement, but some of them do not exhibit motion. Now, why so? Movement of living beings as a character, when we try to define, movement of living beings can be an internal movement and external movement. Now, this is respective, this is relative, right? I may not exhibit a motion, I'm standing still, but there are many movements inside my body. Right? Internal movement, flow of the liquid, blood constantly flows through, right? So when blood is my integral part, when everything we are speaking about as an internal process, so we have to identify that thing also. So movement internally, movement externally, both of it is being exhibited. So internal movement, like the cellular movement, when we look up to cell, then cell is composed of, or majority part of the cell is water, and water inside the cell constantly moves. Inside the cell it moves, outside the cell also it moves, right? So inside the cell what moves is cytoplasm, that we will look up to in the next class also. Outside the cell what moves is the extraterrestrial, the fluid that a particular living being will have, right? So living beings, they may exhibit movement. All living beings will exhibit movement. Yes, of course, plants do not have motion, but they do have movement. Their cells will have movement. There would be an internal movement. You might have read about this thing in your primary classes also, or in the middle school, that plants have a method of movement of water, right? There are two things which are being spoken of, xylem and phloem, right? Phloem, xylem takes, phloem takes the water up, xylem takes the food down, right? So this is also movement, right? So plants may not exhibit motion, but they can exhibit movement. That is one characteristic of living being that must be taken up. With humans, then when we say, it becomes complex movement. We have muscular movement also, we have the movement of the fluid also, we have the movement of the cytoplasm in the cell also, right? So they can be ciliary movement, they can be cytoplasmic movement, movement of the fluids also, which are being characterized, different types. Internal and external movement is something that has to be defined. The second and the foremost function of living being that has to be identified, right? One is movement, and second and the foremost, which drives in the living process, when you say living beings, then what is the basic thing that drives in living beings is the food component. And if I say as a statement that living beings live in environment, or they survive in environment just to eat or get eaten up, is something which may not be exaggeration of the things that we say, right? When we define the things over here, obviously living beings, they are being exhibited. Living beings, they remain in the surrounding to eat something or to get eaten up by something.